The Anthony Richardson era begins this Sunday. What can he and his teammates do to knock off the reigning AFC South champs this weekend? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Hello, everyone. I am Jake Arthur, and he is Zach Hicks. You know the two of us from horseshoehuddle.com. And the two of us, we're about to just come out of the cocoon like butterflies right now. The season is starting. We are in our element. I'm out at the team facility, reporting to you daily out there. And Zach, man, he's a film guy. He's got that dog in him. He's about to bring you every angle of Anthony Richardson you could ever hope to see. You're going to know everything about his game coming up soon, thanks to Zach. So on today's show, it's time to give our final thoughts on Colts versus Jaguars. Again, it's Anthony Richardson's debut. It's the beginning of the Shane Steichen era as well. There's a lot of mystery to it because if anyone is close to the vest in terms of schematics and things like that, it's Shane Steichen. He likes to keep things very, very vanilla when it comes to the preseason. So I think we're going to get some surprises on Sunday. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. But first, when the Colts host the Jaguars this Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern, you got to catch that over on Sirius XM on the SXM app. Just search Colts. All right, Zach. So first and foremost, I've been trying to kick around in my brain, like what, without saying they're going to win, or just, score some even 20 plus points. What does a successful outing for Anthony Richardson and the Colts offense look like? For me, I think I just want to see them get at least a few scores, whether it's field goals and touchdowns. Like it doesn't have to be all touchdowns. I want to see them get at least a few scoring drives on the board. And then, just some life from the offense, even if drives stall out in Jaguars territory. That seems like a productive movement of the offense to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the two things that I've kind of jotted down that I really want to see from the Colts offense this week is seeing the explosive plays return. We just did not see many explosive plays whatsoever from the Colts offense last year, whether that was from the passing game not having it, the running game not having it, whatever it was, the Colts were not able to generate those big plays of 10-plus yard gains whenever they could. They just weren't able to do that as an offense last year. It contributed to them going 3 and out so much, for them just not moving the ball and not getting scoring opportunities. I don't like you said, yes, I'd prefer that every time they cross the 50, they're getting points, but just cross the 50 is what I'm kind of hoping for at this point. Yeah. Because last year that was such a struggle for this Colts offense, was seeing them actually cross the 50-yard line. So you want to see that. And then the other one is just limit the turnovers. That there's going to be hero ball moments from a young quarterback. There's going to be miscommunications with the new offense. There's going to be some drops with a bunch of wide receivers and young tight ends as well. And there's going to be some sacks, I'm sure, and stuff like that. Just don't expound on those with turnovers. Don't turn a 5-yard sack into a forced fumble and a big time minus play for your team. Don't drop a pass and bat it up in the air and turn it into an interception. Don't like Anthony Richardson did against the Buffalo Bills in the preseason, don't try to make a hero play out of a broken RPO and throw it right to a defender. Just don't, I know I'm saying don't allow her here, but just don't make every situation worse like the Colts offense did last year. That's kind of what we saw last year. And that's what killed them. They couldn't move the ball. And then when there was a bad play, it was a bad play. It was a bad play. So again, I don't need them to come out here and score 40 points. in this one. I would love to see it. It would be awesome. But just having that explosive element back in the offense and then limiting those mistakes and not just, kicking your own butt the entire game, that's really what I want to see from this Colts offense under Shane Steichen and with new quarterback Anthony Richardson.
And I don't know about you, but I think this will be at least the first game will be pretty run based offensively. Yeah. So we're probably not going to see a great sample size from the passing game, but I'm interested to see what is the hierarchy of that passing game. Like, we're pretty confident that Michael Pittman is still the top option, but is it Kylan Granson who's really the second guy? Is it like Josh Downs? Like, where do we see Anthony Richardson starting to favor guys and in what situations? Because at the end of the day, there could be, guys who are intended to be the target, or like they rank wherever in the progression of reads. But where is Anthony most comfortable throwing? I'm pretty interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, one thing I will say is let's not draw too many conclusions after this one, though. Like, let's not, if Josh Downs comes out and has 8 catches, let's not say, okay, this is the guy. This is the number one wide receiver, because it really comes down to matchups. It comes down to where the Colts want to exploit this defense. And when you look at the Jaguars, their strength is their cornerback room and their safety room. Rayshon Jenkins, a really good safety. Andre Sisco, a really good safety. Tyson Campbell, a really good young corner on the outside. That's where their strength is. Where their weakness is more over the middle of the field. Their linebacker group, their weird willingness to drop defensive ends into coverage, which is something that some teams do it, I guess. So that's where teams have been able to kill this Jaguars defense the last couple of years, is throwing it to running backs, throwing it to tight ends over the middle, throwing it to slot wide receivers. So I would say, yes, I'm with you. I want to see that hierarchy in the passing game and see who Richardson prefers. But also, if we do get a game where Kylan Granson gets 6 catches, or Josh Downs gets 8 catches, or Deion Jackson goes off for 10 catches like he did in this matchup last year, I wouldn't draw too many conclusions yet. We got to see a little bit more of a sample size. But it all comes down to, I'm just excited to see these guys on the football field.
Yeah, and before we get to the rest of the skill position guys, I think we're gonna know pretty quick what the offensive line is gonna look like, because when it's bad, it's really, really bad, and it's like glaring. We've all seen what that looks like. So very curious just to see what the offensive line is going to bring to the table. The Jaguars obviously always put a big premium on, freaks on defense. So you got Trevon Walker going into his second season as a good example. So is the offensive line going to hold up? Because another thing is, they're already obviously down Jonathan Taylor, and Zach Moss probably is not going to be ready to go quite yet. So they'll be down to Deion Jackson, Evan Hull, and probably like Jake Funk. Like, will they be able to run the ball at all with guys not named Anthony Richardson? And how much is the offensive line to, how much say do they have in it, essentially?
Yeah, I think they'll be able to run the ball fine. Again, just having that mobile quarterback just dictates so much in terms of spacing. I'm sure they'll be able to get their 5-6 yards every now and then and have a productive rushing attack. But, I remember last year we were looking at this Colts offensive line and we were worried going into the season. Danny Pinter, we were worried about. Matt Pryor, we were worried about. Now, we didn't envision it being as bad as it was, but we were worried about those 2 spots. And I remember my famous last words going to the season were, if this offensive line can't handle the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars in the first 2 games, then we should be worried, because the fine defensive lines, not horrible defensive lines whatsoever, but those aren't defensive lines where you're saying oh my gosh, they're going to get a sack every play, like a Philadelphia Eagles defensive line, or even a Kansas City Chiefs last year with Chris Jones and stuff like that. Like, they didn't have that star power or the production to have that kind of fear. Now, it kind of is the same thing this year, where it's like this Jaguars defensive line and their defensive scheme is good. Like, I'm not trying to slight them whatsoever, but if this Colts offensive line comes out and looks like what they did last year against this Jaguars defensive line, then I'm pretty concerned for the rest of the games, because again, this is a defensive line where I'm not asking for them to completely dominate, but if you're going to be a decent offensive line, you have to stand your ground in this game. Like, this is not a defensive line that you can give up, a 40% pressure clip to or something like that. So it's kind of where I was with the Texans going into that first game last year, where it's like, I just want to see them be adequate and not get bowled over. And unfortunately, last year against the Texans, we saw what was, bound to happen the rest of that season, was the Texans defensive line just bum rushed the Colts offensive line. So hopefully we see a better performance from them in this week 1 game in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to wait for trends in certain areas, but I feel like with the offensive line, like when they show you who they are, like you need to take pretty quick note because that's an area you can't just let figure it out. Like you have to get reinforcements for that. So coming up here in a second, we'll talk about the defensive side of the ball. What do the Colts need to be prepared for when it comes to Trevor Lawrence and that whole cast of characters? But first, I want to talk to you guys about Nutrafol, not Zach this time. You guys don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. No drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural, science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free, patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sexual health. Go to Nutrafol.com/men to take their hair health wellness quiz. Identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting root causes of thinning, such as stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. And it actually works. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol men's hair growth supplements. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONNFL.
And thanks again for making Locked On Colts your first listen every day. The Locked On Ultimate NFL Preview is here. The 7-episode extravaganza brings opinions, analysis, and plenty of debate from all 32 of our Locked On NFL hosts, with added insights from our national experts. It's a can't-miss series before the season kicks off. Catch every episode on Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. All right, Jake, so diving into this defense, there's a lot of storylines we can look at with the Colts defense. And honestly, I didn't even have time to really dive into the Colts defense yesterday with Tony because I just needed to keep talking about Anthony Richardson because that really is the most important thing for the Colts. But this is a big game for the Colts defense. The Colts defense typically starts a little slow. We've seen that the last couple seasons, no matter who the defense coordinator is, Matt Eberflus or Gus Bradley. We know they had struggles in the first 2 games against the Jaguars and the Texans last year. But then they really found their own after that. Now, will they continue to start slow and not get pressure on the quarterback and get beat down the field? What will we see from this Colts defense? What are some big things you're looking at, though, going into this game, Jake, with the Colts defense?
Yeah, some of those bumps, you talked about from early last season, a lot of it seemed to be in the back 7, just kind of figuring out coverages where people needed to be. Now, hopefully that's not as big of a shift now that a lot of guys are in their second season with Gus Bradley, but the cornerback group in general is pretty new. So that's something definitely to keep an eye on. But up front, I'm hoping if the Colts can't do anything else defensively, I'm hoping the defensive line looks like it's clicking, getting pressure on Trevor Lawrence. And, I think they had quite a bit of issue with Travis Etienne last year. There were some big plays on the outside.
The second game, yeah.
In the second game. Yeah. So a lot of that is going to be on the linebackers and just, guys making sure they're not getting, caught on blocks and everything. But another big thing, it was very noticeable. Trevor Lawrence in the quick passing game in the first game, you couldn't get a hand on him. The guy had the ball out of his hands immediately. And altogether in both games combined, he was 45 of 52. So really, really efficient. So
45 of 52 passing in those 2 games?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I didn't realize it was that bad.
It was crazy. I think he was 20 of 22 in the second game.
Oh,
you know how the Colts do it. You can throw 90% on them if you want.
Oh, man. I did not realize it was that bad.
Yeah. So got to get to him. He's a hard guy to bring down, obviously, but it doesn't, if the quick game is going like that, I don't even think the sacks matter. It's quickly being disruptive, win off the snap. So we need to see life from the defensive line, especially with how deep you and I are advertising them as.
Yeah, you got to see more than what we saw again early last season before they found their groove. We were saying, look, their run defense is fine, but they just are not getting any pressure. They just signed Yannick Ngakoue, or just traded for Yannick Ngakoue, and DeForest Buckner's banged up, and they're just not getting pressure. You want to see that pressure early and often from this Colts defensive line, and this is a good matchup. This is a good opportunity for them. The Jaguars don't have Cam Robinson in this game. I believe he's suspended the first couple weeks, so I believe Walker Little is going to be stepping in as a starter. Walker Little is a good tackle. Like, it's actually, the Jaguars are one of those few teams that actually has a good backup tackle to throw in there with someone out. But still, you want to see what you can do against this team. They just lost Jawan Taylor as well in the offseason to the Chiefs. So this is kind of like, I'm not saying it's a bad offensive line, but it's more vulnerable than what it was last year. So maybe you can get some pressure on Trevor Lawrence and turn that 45 of 52 into at least a 45 of 60. Like, let's at least get it to like a 70% or something. Like, that is insane. But one thing I will say about getting pressure on Trevor Lawrence and just the overall way you play Trevor Lawrence is, I remember last year, even though it was only 7 incompletions last year, 7 incompletions in those 2 games, there were like 2 or 3 drop picks that the Colts had. When it comes to Trevor Lawrence, it's very much an Andrew Luck thing, where he will make the most insane arm arrogant plays that you'll ever see because he is such a talented quarterback. But with that comes the mistakes and comes the hero ball. And I think Trevor Lawrence is kind of like an Andrew Luck, where that'll never go away. I think you'll always have those moments. I do remember in the first game, I want to say Stephon Gilmore or Julian Blackmon it was a 2-on-1 down the field, and they went up and dropped an interception. Very clear dropped interception. And there were just a couple of those against Trevor Lawrence. You're going to get 1 or 2 of those chances every game. The Colts have to capitalize, which is the perfect transition into our next player we got to talk about, Shaquille Leonard. He is on track to play this weekend. His first time playing since the Commanders game last year, I want to say.
So. Yeah.
The Commanders game last season. And in that game, he had an interception just because that's who he is. What does he look like in this game? He's had a good offseason. We're optimistic that he's mostly back, but it's very different when the bullets are really flying in a real NFL game. What do you think he's going to look like out there, Jake? And can he add that extra boost of creating turnovers for this Colts defense that severely lacked in that area last year?
Yeah, so I'm first curious to see if he's going to be on like a snap count or anything, because we talked to him today, Thursday, and he wasn't sure. He basically said, that's not up to me. But also he said, like, he didn't say that he's fully himself yet. Like, I think maybe he shows something on Sunday that tells him that. But I think he's still working back to that. So I'm curious if he's even going to play all the snaps. But really, regardless, I mean, before he got hurt against the Bears in those practices, they were saying their next step they want to see him is just like a full collision tackle, just like normal tackling one-on-one. We're cramming together. What does that look like for him, and can he withstand it? So, I mean, he was moving around really well in the summer too, but I think what I'm most looking forward to him is being able to complete the game with whatever snaps he's given and make a play or two out there. Yeah. He's really good at kind of shooting the gaps and getting things down in the backfield, but also whether it's a punched ball, whether it's an interception, whatever, bring back some of what's always made you the maniac to the defense, because they need it.
Yeah. And then the last thing we need to talk about is this young secondary from cornerback to safety. It's an extremely young group, and this is very much a baptized by fire situation because the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, I know I just mentioned a second ago, Trevor Lawrence will give you a couple every game that you have to make a play on, but with that, you also get the 25 other passes that are just going to be pristine and on the money and really, really good plays by one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. And it's not like he's throwing to nobodies out there. He's throwing it to Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, the massive offseason acquiree that they have there. And then they have Zay Jones as well as their slot receiver, another really solid player. These young corners and these young safeties are going to have their hands full this entire game with these Jaguar skill position players. So I'm really excited to see what these guys can do. And like I said, it's kind of going to be baptized by fire. And I'm ready for it. I want to see what these guys can do in a big matchup like this.
I agree. And it's, again, other than Calvin Ridley, who's at his peak. Yeah, at his peak, one of the better receivers in the league. But the rest of these guys aren't necessarily household names like you're talking about, but they work so well within this offense. And it's like Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence just know how to accentuate these guys.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something you got to battle in your own. And that's not even anything you can control. Just, be in the right spots, I guess, is a big thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be rough. Like Trevor Lawrence is going to have a decent game. Like that's just how it's going to be. Just don't get like fooled too many times. Like, I don't know, do your job. It seems so simple, but like it's when you're facing an offense that just does what they do so well, it's just, again, hard. You have to control what you can control.
Yeah. Well, just don't get beat on the double moves. Don't get out of position, make the plays that are in front of you, and then capitalize on those 1 to 2 plays that Lawrence is going to give you each game.
Yes.
And, if you finish the game 20 of 25 with a pick and 200 yards or something because you're coming up making your tackles, that's a fine game. Like that, again, the stat line looks fine and because he's a good quarterback, but it's not about making him have the worst game of his life. It's about containing him and limiting the damage and making the plays available to you. That's really all you can do against these top quarterbacks. So we'll see what this Colts defense can do. I'm optimistic. And of course, with the week 1 foolishness that comes, I am pretty optimistic that the Colts defense can perform better than what most are expecting. But next, we're going to talk about some fantasy football. I'm just going to kick it over to Jake, and he's going to talk fantasy around my head for a couple minutes. But first, our friends over at PrizePicks want to tell you all about just their amazing website. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Testing my skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Jake definitely has the skills. I'm hoping to acquire the skills, so we'll see what happens there. I'm doing my best here. PrizePicks is really simple to play, and I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. When you have an attention span like me that only lasts like 60 seconds at best, this is the perfect site to go to. Quick withdrawals, easy game plan, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Anthony Richardson has a more or less projection of 194.5 passing yards this weekend. What do you guys want to do with that? Do you guys want to go more? Do you want to go less? I'm feeling optimistic. Let's go more. Anthony Richardson, more than 194.5 passing yards this weekend. Make sure you guys are going to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, Jake. So I know PrizePicks makes it a little bit easier for someone like me, but I'm just not the most in tune fantasy football player. I was back in like high school, but I'm watching too much All 22 and trying to, decipher that stuff. It's hard for me to get into fantasy. So Jake, just school us here. What are some fantasy things you're looking at this weekend? Who are some players on the Colts that you are really going for this week, and some Colts players that you are really fading down the stretch?
Yeah, so obviously week 1 is just like the kind of the biggest head scratcher because all you really know is what the team did, your opponent did last year, and whether or not they made positive steps to improving that. So just looking at a couple areas of vulnerability, I guess, for Jacksonville. They were 28th overall in pass defense last year at 238.5 yards per game, and they were also tied for 25th in sacks. So not a lot of sacks, and that led to, extended drives and quarterbacks having, some bigger performances. So that's one thing for Anthony Richardson that you can kind of put in your mind because people have been drafting Anthony Richardson at some starting levels, particularly in 2 QB leagues. Richardson is probably going to be starting in a lot of leagues this week. So just, again, looking at last year, Jacksonville gave up the 9th most points to quarterbacks of all teams. I looked into that a little further for guys like Anthony Richardson, essentially, because he's going to be a runner, and I think for a little bit is going to be a pretty reliant on that. So you look at it, last year, Jalen Hurts, Daniel Jones, and Lamar Jackson, in their matchups, they averaged 14 carries for 78 yards on the ground, and they scored 2 touchdowns. So you look at that with Richardson, I feel comfortable saying he could have 40, 50, 60 yards. Like, that's not a lot to say from a running quarterback, where the game plan is probably going to be pretty run-based. Yeah. So I think that's fair. And then when they get in the red zone, good chance he scores a touchdown if they're within 5 yards or so, especially, again, you're down your top 2 running backs. So, Anthony Richardson, I think pretty good chance he's going to put up respectable rushing numbers. And then even if he only passes for like 175, 200 yards and a touchdown, I think his complete body of work, because he's a quarterback that can run better than most, I think is going to make him a pretty decent option to start. Now, with that said, I know he's a rookie, but I don't have great confidence in many other guys out there right now. You look at who he's throwing to, obviously. Kylen Granson makes sense. They seem to have good chemistry, and there were tight ends that had pretty decent performances against Jacksonville last year. They gave up the 8th most points to the tight end position, and the Colts have one of the best separators among tight ends in the NFL right now. And you have like Travis Kelce. People are up in the air about that, whether to start him. People don't know whether to start like TJ Hawkinson. So that's already the most shallow position in fantasy sports. So Kylen, an outlier, if we're going, I'm going to put these guys in green, yellow, and red. So I put Richardson in the green. I would put Granson in the yellow because, we haven't seen him as a proven fantasy performer before. And again, this is week 1. So what do you think about these guys? Like, you may not be the studious fantasy player, but matchups, guys who can take advantage of certain things. So what do you think?
I would say that, looking at this from a PrizePicks Daily Fantasy Sports Made Easy perspective, that's what I'm looking at. Not looking at standard leagues or PPR leagues or anything like that. Like looking at those daily fantasy, I think Kylen Granson is a really good ad because I'm assuming that his daily fantasy numbers are going to be like really low, like
pretty cheap. Yeah,
it'll probably be like a 2,300 type guy or something like super, super low. When it comes to his daily fantasy. And that's a guy where, you can stack like top tier wide receivers and top tier quarterbacks and stuff, and then throw a Granson at the bottom and you might get a touchdown. You might get 60, 70 yards and you're feeling pretty good there. I think Josh Downs is another one that's pretty interesting too. We did see in the preseason when he kind of became that starting slot receiver in the 3rd game, he did get a little bit of looks from Anthony Richardson. He was starting to get some catches. We even saw in the 2nd game as well when he was still out there and all the starters were sitting that he was getting a ton of looks in the quick passing game and blitz pickups and stuff like that. So I think Josh Downs is interesting, especially with how the Jaguars just kind of struggled over the middle of the field in defense last year. And then Deion Jackson, I have to throw him in there just because a starting running back in fantasy football is such a valuable thing to have, especially one that can catch balls. Yes. And we saw last year, 10 for 79 last year in this matchup was a big part of that game plan. And with his explosive ability in the bigger rush lanes that are going to be there because of a mobile quarterback, I'm not out on Deion Jackson as long as Zach Moss doesn't play. Like, there's still a chance Zach Moss plays this weekend. But I think those are the 3 that I like as like daily fantasy sports guys, like towards the bottom, because they're going to be really good value players that if the Colts offense does do some good things this week, they could all kind of hit off pretty big.
Yeah. And obviously we're leaving out some bigger names, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce. I'm not ready to encourage you guys to start the outside receivers yet until we see what's going on. Again, this is only week 1. So I want to be able to give you guys picks we're speaking with confidence for, and I just can't say that yet. Now, some players I know I do not want to play this week. Evan Hull, I think he'll get some playing time, but you said there's the outside chance with Zach Moss. But Deion Jackson, he's going to be your short yardage runner. So in the red zone, that's going to be your guy that's probably going to vulture a touchdown or so.
Anthony Richardson is a short yardage runner.
Well, yeah, of course. I'm talking from the running back perspective.
Yeah.
Because I have the most confidence in terms of rushing in Richardson this week.
Yeah.
But Jax, he's a pass catcher as well. I mean, Evan Hull is too, but I can't say he's a better pass catcher than Deion Jackson. Like, Deion, I think it's going to be heavier skewed towards him in this game plan. And then the Colts defense, like they could do some nice things. They could come up with a turnover or two, maybe a couple sacks. But I'm not going to encourage you to start them against Doug Peterson's offense with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and those guys and Calvin Ridley. Just don't do it. I think they'll probably be a pretty good unit in fantasy across the entire season, but this is a matchup I don't love.
Yeah, I would also encourage not starting Jonathan Taylor or Jelani Woods this week.
I think you nailed
that.
that.
I think, like, again, I'm not a big fantasy guy, but I wouldn't start either of those guys. Just a hunch here. I don't know if they're going to do too much for you. I know there's some home leagues.
Lock of the week.
I know there are some home leagues where those guys will be starting for some teams, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't start them this week. But everydayers, don't worry, you don't have to miss us too much. Jake will be back live on YouTube tomorrow and also live at Evermore.
Yep, Sunday morning. So
Sunday morning. Sunday morning. Yeah,
Sunday. Yeah. So the tailgate, 4-hour tailgate, 8:30 to 12:30. I'll be up on stage producing the show from 11 to 12. I think Andrew Moore from Horseshoe Huddle is going to join me up there as well.
Heck yeah.
So yeah, that'll be great. Tickets are in the show notes, so please join us for that. It's going to be awesome.
Perfect. I almost had the day wrong, so I'm glad you jumped in there. But if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to Locked On Colts podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'd love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll see you guys. Jake will see you guys back here Sunday morning.